Washington?
Here.
Wilkins.
Here.
There's this interesting thing that happens from time to time. And that is, folks will not show up to class. They'll show up on day one, all right? Be on day one, get their roll sheet, snap. Then they won't show up again until the first exam. Then they show up for the test, and I'm calling roll. I'm like, no, they're not here. And they're like, oh, here I am. I'm like, what?
Where you been?
Yeah, exactly. Where you been? You expected to pass this, but they're not. Long story. Gaming the system, as it were. All right, let's roll. So, osteomalacia, rickets, and osteoporosis. Your skeleton's a bank for calcium. Don't have enough blood calcium? Take it out of the skeleton. Got plenty of blood calcium? Put it into the skeleton. Your skeleton is a bank for calcium. Until it's not. All right? That's like your bank account. You start to have too much of a good time. Sometimes you start pulling out calcium and it just goes and goes and goes, and you end up with problems. And one of those problems is osteoporosis. That would be osteo, meaning
Bone,
porosis.
porous, butt full of
Bone
holes.
looks porous. The bone looks porous. Now, there's a couple other little things I'm going to mention here. These are osteomalacia and rickets. These are basically the same disorder. Think of osteomalacia as being seen more in adults, and rickets as being like a prepubescent kid thing. Okay, young children. But in both cases, this is a result of poorly mineralized, softened, weakened, low calcium bones. So you are aware. Let's go stand still. I'm not sure where we're headed. You are aware that your bones have about a third organic components, about 2/3 mineral. Yes?
Yes.
You start taking away the mineral components, the bones soften real fast. And they get flexible. Okay? Flexible bones are not what we want. So like a kid with rickets, what does a kid look like? There's a classic appearance here. Do what? Your legs bow out. Why? Because the weight of the body pushing down forces the legs out. Does that make sense? The bones are not mineralized correctly. So the side effect of the bones not being mineralized correctly means that the bones are going to bend. And as we walk around and do the things that we do, the bones bend outwards. Now, this can be taken care of. Okay, we can fix this. We got to fix the diet first, really, and then adjust. There's bracing that can be done, but oftentimes kids just grow right out of this. Okay, but it's about the vitamins. It's about the calcium. Where we used to see this all the time is in like hardcore war-torn countries. So places where kids don't get enough sunlight, they can't really go outdoors, so they're not making any vitamin D. There's no vitamin D supplementation, obviously, so their bones just don't mineralize. They can't absorb calcium from their diet. Or alternatively, in places where kids have really terrible diet, okay, where there's not enough food to go around, it also means not enough calcium, which also means the bones get soft. Okay, as the bones get soft, their legs go outwards. That is rickets. Right? That is rickets. Very common when kids are growing real fast. Now, who has osteoporosis? Not little kids, but older folks. You better believe it. 60 plus typically. Yeah, in the neighborhood, but 60 plus. And what's going to happen here is the bones get porous. They get demineralized to some degree. I wish I had a good example bone back there. I saw one a few years back, but I think it was in the other lab. Like you look at the spongy bone, and it's just like big open chasms. There's very little there. The bones begin to lose their mineralization, and as a result of that, they're just not as strong as they're supposed to be. All right. Yeah, that'll do. Leading to all kinds of problems. The classic example, you've heard of somebody saying, oh yeah, grandma fell and broke her hip, yes? The reality in a lot of cases is grandma's hip probably broke, and then she fell, but at that stage you're a chicken and an egg conversation, you know which one came first. And the reality probably is the bone was so demineralized, the bone was so weak that it just broke from walking around, and then she fell over. All right, this is very normal in our modern society. Okay, very normal. So when you look at normal bone, like yours, healthy, it's going to look like this in the spongy bone, whereas the trabeculae here in a person with osteoporosis, you can see all the open area. Okay, lots and lots and lots of open area. This is going to lead to those compression fractures that I've already talked to you a little bit about as time progresses. We've already described how your parents or grandparents have gotten shorter over time. Yes? Now, that's a double-edged conversation. The spinal discs will degrade over time too, they get smaller. But the vertebrae certainly have compression fractures over time as well. And this leads to this classic hunched appearance. Did we talk about the little old ladies in your lives? Yes? Okay, let me make sure we're all clear on this. You don't typically see large people at old age. Sorry. Just giving you a heads up. Okay, large folks tend not to live as long as small folks. So if you're looking for somebody in their like late 70s, 80s, 90s, small, okay? And for whatever reason, gentlemen, we tend not to live as long as the ladies, okay? So if you're looking for somebody that's seeing like real osteoporosis, you're typically looking for smaller ladies. Is that fair?
Yes.
And you've seen that classic appearance of being somewhat hunched over, all right? I never understood it growing up. I saw it, you know, in my daily life, but I saw it, I didn't understand. It's from the weight of the head and the shoulders, pulling on the spine constantly, leading to compression fractures that sort of take the spinal vertebrae and compress them like this. So the person ends up with this hunched over appearance as a result of osteoporosis. That's what that is, all right? It's osteoporosis, the weight of the head and the neck, the shoulders, pulling down on the rest of the body, leading to, so that appearance, wait, have we talked about that yet? Have we talked about scoliosis, lordosis, and kyphosis? Oh, okay, we're probably gonna see that real soon. Start on that there for me. All right, good, let's go here. So there are risk factors for osteoporosis. Most often, this is gonna be seen in older, post-menopausal Caucasian women, all right? Others obviously will see this, but normally this is what we're looking for. This is a mixture of diet and a whole host of other nuances, okay? So around 30% of folks between 60 and 70 years of age are gonna see this. By the time you hit 80, 70%, all right? 70% are gonna be displaying some degree of osteoporosis. Now, why not men? There's a simple reason for this, and it deals with sex hormones. And you'll note that I said post-menopausal up top here. When you go through menopause, you stop producing estrogen at near the rate that it was produced beforehand. And when that happens, you don't accrue calcium the way you're supposed to. Does it make sense? All right. Gentlemen, congratulations. Make testosterone throughout your lifespan. I mean, it tails off a little bit as time progresses, but you make it throughout your lifespan. And the side effect of that is these sex hormones drive calcium absorption in strong bones. Okay. Testosterone drives strong bones. This is one of the things that it does. It's why when people are trying to cheat at sports, they take testosterone supplementation. Okay, it makes strong bones. This is how it works. You go through, where is it? Menopause, and you stop producing estrogen, the bones weaken. All right? You just stop accruing calcium the way you're supposed to accrue calcium. And it leads to osteoporosis. Now, petite body forms, people that are just naturally small, they have less bone mass to lose. So when they start losing bone mass, it tends to be extreme. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So if your bones are already small, the chance of them having more problems from weakening is increased. So people that are small tend to have more issues with osteoporosis. Insufficient exercise. If you're very, what's the term?
Sedentary?
Yeah, I was going to say sessile, but that's the fancy
That's a
entomological term.
That's a more fun
Sessile.
word.
You don't move around much. Okay, if you don't get a lot of exercise, that's certainly going to lead to problems. But why? Why would you, if you live a very sessile lifestyle, why would that cause you to have more problems with osteoporosis?
Bones aren't used to the strain and stress.
Oh, we're getting there. You're getting there.
It stands to reason generally those who live more sedentary lifestyles don't also have the best diets.
Okay, that's fair too. That's fair too.
Maybe not going out as much.
All right, think about Wolff's Law. How many times have we harped on this, yeah? Okay, the idea here is that if you start to use your bones a lot, the bones will get larger, yes?
Yes,
So a person just sits around all day long,
bones ain't gonna get larger.
they have less to lose. Their bones are already smaller. If you're sitting around all day doing nothing, your bones are already smaller. So as a result of that, osteoporosis tends to have a more intensive impact. And again, 70% of people by age 80. This is important for us to talk about. You know several people whom are suffering from this right now, all right? They might even realize it. They're suffering. Again, diet, poor diet, low calcium diet. Smoking is a real killer here because smoking reduces estrogen naturally. And if you're reducing estrogen when you're young, by the time you get to menopause and you stop producing, then your skeleton's already weakened. So you're sort of pre-staging for osteoporosis, which you don't want. And with this in mind, let's talk about treatments real quick, and then I'll tell you I'll draw all this together for you. Treatments. Obviously, calcium and vitamin D supplementation. You don't have enough calcium, don't have enough vitamin D, take supplements, calcium and vitamin D, the system works. Weight-bearing exercises, get more exercise, which is hard to convince somebody to do if they've already got damage from osteoporosis, but weight-bearing exercise I'll see. But here's the fun one, all right? This is an interesting story. Hormone replacement therapy. All right, if the main driver for osteoporosis is not enough estrogen, what's the obvious answer?
More estrogen.
Add estrogen. Can we do this in like pill form? And the answer is a good old sound, like resounding.
Yes.
Yeah, we can do that. That ain't hard at all. I mean, they got it all day long at Publix, back behind the counter there. Like, it's not a hard process. But there's evidence that links pill form, taken estrogen, to heart attacks, strokes, and breast cancer. Yeah, I know, right? Like, it's hard to say. But here's the nuance to this. There's gotta have been some cutting edge research done on this, like new stuff. This is a few years old. This is a few years old. And as a result of it, whenever you see preliminary data that says there may be problems, your chance of getting funding for more research is pretty limited because nobody wants to get sued for causing somebody to have cancer, all right? Yeah, but I'm here to tell you, there are folks today getting prescribed pill form estrogen to treat osteoporosis, and it works for the skeleton, okay? Might there be some other nuances in play here? Yeah, maybe, I don't know, okay? Yeah.
I'll actually find out more about that here in a month because I had a hysterectomy last year
that'll do it.
and I have avoided HRT and I'm starting to have some symptoms.
Issues, some flashes.
Yeah, so we are going to discuss the risk benefit.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
I will tell you all about it once I find out.
All right, drugs. This is a weird one, okay?
What kind of drugs?
Right.
Not what you're thinking. Did you know that the United States is like the only place you ever see commercials for medications?
Mhm.
It's the weirdest thing. They're like, take this drug, it'll make you feel great, life's gonna be wonderful. May cause death.
It may cause
Right?
death.
You've seen this? Like all these medications, they have side effects. This is how it works. For whatever reason, we don't know the mechanism. I'm sure that there's lots of folks trying to figure it out. Folks take statins, it's a cholesterol drug, statins, right? If you can't manage your diet on your own, you're having heart issues, you're going to be prescribed statins. Okay, let's let the grease flow right through you. Weird as that sounds, it's the truth. Okay, but for whatever reason, statins increase bone density. Like, it's documented. It's documented. Folks that are taking statins, the side effect of this, the side effect of the medication is that it increases bone density. So we can figure that out. Well, hell, we're going to be doing good. But, and I'll tell you one more little rub to this, something that we are working on. Bears. All right, bears. Let's talk about bears. Bears hibernate during harsh months. Yes, we're aware of this.
Mhm.
Mama bears, when they are in hibernation, put on bone mass. Their bones get denser and more calcium rich in preparation for arising in the spring and hunting to feed her new offspring. Now, how can you lay there for 3 months and accrue bone mass? And the answer is, don't know. There's a lot of folks trying to figure that out. So you can harness that concept and pill form that thing. Man, we're going to fix osteoporosis like that. Okay? So, now, a tale of two grandmothers. My grandmother, let's see, where do I want to start this conversation? Except for that grandmother Hopper, my dad's mom.
Oh,
No one ever crossed her. Is that fair?
heard.
She was, like, her husband died when she was in her 40s, and she was the matriarch of a 3-kid family back in, like, 1960. Yeah. Like, no one crossed my grandmother. All right, she spoke 2 languages. She had a 4-year degree. Well, you know, back in the day, like, she was in college in the 30s, got a 4-year degree. Like, yeah, nobody crossed my grandmother. I watched her threaten a man one time. It was very intense. And the dude backed down. He was like, I want no part of this. No one would cross my. I watched her pistol whip a dog one time. It was really rough. No one would have crossed my grandmother. Y'all ready? Like, is that fair? When she was in her 80s, she could get a ball and glove and play catch with you, man. Solid as a rock. No one crossed my grandmother. There's no air conditioning in her house. No AC. A few light bulbs. Yeah, modern day. Yeah, modern day. This was in the late 80s, early 90s.
Like here?
Yeah, Alabama, rolled up. But no, not in Tuscaloosa.
But still.
Near Chilton County, Alabama.
Mm-mm.
But anyway, on her farm, okay, on her farm, no one crossed her. She was always active. If I went and stayed with my grandmother while my, the folks are at work or whatever, you think I was sitting around? No, she put me to work, man. I'm raking leaves. I'm dragging stuff to cans for her. Man, I'm taking care of business, okay? There was no sitting around with my grandmother on my dad's side. And her skeleton was rock solid till the day she died. She had a random stroke, man. Mid-80s, random stroke, hit the ground, never knew what happened. Like she had her comb in her hand and was brushing her hair, all right? A tough lady, is what I'm trying to tell you. Then there's my grandmother on my mom's side, whom I loved equally. Both of these are wonderful people, just different. And I'd go and stay with my grandmother on my mom's side. She'd be like, come on in, sit down and watch our stories. So we'd sit down, we'd watch some TV, daytime TV. Hey man, I'm like 6 years old watching I Love Lucy back in the day, man. You know,
Sounds
like
great to me.
reruns of black and white TV is what she was about. It's how she rolled. We'd watch, I remember there's a guy, you probably looked this up on YouTube, it was Mr. Food. It's like the first cooking show, Mr. Food. He'd be on the news, all right? You're watching Mr. Food, she's like, ooh, that looks, it's what it is. It is what it is. We'd sit around in the air conditioner, watch TV. It's great. Remember being a little kid? Yeah, let's have more of that, okay? And when she was in her 60s, she fell and broke her hip, okay? Then her knee, she had to have a knee replacement. And with every one of these surgeries, she's getting more and more sessile. She's just sitting around the house more and more. By the time she died, I might add, with major neural degeneration from Alzheimer's, which who can say, chicken and an egg here as well. You sit around and have Alzheimer's, or you have Alzheimer's and sit around. Her skeleton was just, terrible. She had 2 knees, I think both hips. Like, it was rough. She was bedridden, absolutely bedridden. So there's this famous phrase. Have we done 30 minutes on this slide yet? There's this famous phrase. If you don't use it, you lose it. And that is factual when it comes to your skeleton. So you want to not experience major problems from osteoporosis? Stay active. Stay active. You stay active, the chance of having issues is vastly increased. All right, yeah. And I might add that my grandmother on my dad's side perfectly fit the description of folks at the highest risk for osteoporosis. And she had no problems. No problems at all. All right? So stay active. Stay active. All right. Bone grafts can happen. Skeletal parts. Here we go. Okay. So let me give a little brief description of what is about to occur. I've had this conversation with you before. In my previous life, I didn't know whose students I was going to see in lab. Okay, were they going to be mine? Were they going to be somebody else's students? Who knows? Anybody can sign up for any lab they want. It was a weird concept where I came from. Okay. So I put a bunch of lab material into my lectures because if you're my lecture students, I want you to know what you're doing when you're in a lab situation, when you're looking at bones. And by comparison, when you're in my lab, I put a bunch of lecture stuff in because I want you to know what you're doing when you're looking at bones. Does that make sense? So I'm going to run through these with you real quick. Everything here is very important. Okay, of merit. Have you seen it before when we just were talking about the skeleton previously? Parts, for sure. I just want to run through it with you. This is not a complicated concept to make dead gum sure you know what you're doing. So let's roll. All right. There's some general terms. If you're going to talk about bones, you got to know these terms. Like a foramen, an opening or an orifice. Remember, like here's a superior orbital foramen. It's a little hole. There is a lacrimal foramen, okay, a little opening down inside of there. It's a hole in the bone, a little tube, small one, as opposed to a canal or a meatus, which is a big hole, all right? Really, the way you would describe this is a foramen is kind of flat and open, whereas a canal or a meatus is like a big long tube. Is that fair? So when I'm saying big or small, I'm sort of misleading you. A canal is a long tube like a straw, whereas a foramen is like a hole somewhere in the bone. Yeah, that's better. I feel better about that now. Fossas are indentations. Fissures are big open cracks. Sutures are areas where flat bones grow together, like in the skull. We've been talking about sutures this whole decade time, have we not? Talking about how the skull bones come together. Sinuses, where do you find sinuses? They are openings, they are cavities, yes indeed, but where? Where in you?
Everywhere. Well, not everywhere,
I would not
but
agree with that. Yeah,
Anywhere that's-
where do you have famous sinuses? Come on, team.
in your
It's a winter guy,
thoracic,
dead gum.
thoracic
Up
cavity,
here.
facial
Sinuses,
cavities.
sinuses. Not serous membranes, sinuses. Up here, they're all up here. Okay? You've all had a sinus headache before. I know, you have. And that is ethmoid sinus, pay attention. Ethmoid sinuses through here. Okay? You've got a frontal sinus up top, like this, and then kind of right between my fingers, but right in the middle of the skull, there's this big open spot. Okay, it's this Phelan sinus, right between there, right between there. And again, the idea is you got to counterbalance the weight of the face. All right, so you don't want your head to be hanging down like this. We are not chimpanzees. Okay, so our heads don't hang down. I'll explain to you why that's interesting in a second. I'm going to talk about it right now, though. All right, let's go here. Speaking of the skull, your skull is made up of two sets of bones, cranial bones and facial bones. You can see these, all right? So there are bones which surround the skull like a helmet, or I'm sorry, skull, surround the brain, here we go, surround the brain like a helmet, and there's bones of the face. And keep in mind that the spinal cord kind of connects right there. So we've got a balancing act going on here, folks. This has a certain amount of weight, and we want a roughly equal amount of weight out front. So a lot of these bones in these areas are completely hollow, whereas these are all solid and full of bone or brain material. Is that fair? So it's a balancing act. We have already looked through the skull and talked about the parts and pieces. I'm not going to run through all of these again, but you can see, for instance, a sagittal suture here, a sagittal suture. What is sagittal? What is a sagittal section? Right down through here, yeah?
Yeah.
So where is this suture going to run? Right down the middle, man. Remember, learning these terms, it helps as time progresses. Learn the dadgum terms, folks. If you know what sagittal means, you're never going to miss a sagittal suture. Okay? This is where those two, what are called parietal bones, grow together at the top of the skull. As opposed to this one, what's this one between the frontal bone and the parietal bone? Say it louder. Coronal suture. Like the corona on the sun, yeah? Good, I like it. All right, we've already talked about mastoid process, I believe. It's behind your ear right there. Describe these. We've talked about occipital condyles. Those are where the skull connects to the vertebrae. I saw a skull. There we go. And let's talk just a little bit about all these lumps and bumps and spots. Why are there all these weird high spots on the skull? What are these? Like your superior and inferior nuchal lines, your external occipital crests, protuberances. What are they? Yes. Louder, one more time. That is exactly right. Because those areas are going to toughen because they're getting pulled against all the dadgum time. Much like if you started playing tennis, your bone mass in your right arm would be a lot stronger, if you will, than your left. If you're constantly pulling against a spot on a bone, that area of the bone will toughen, it will strengthen over time, and you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to see it. Newborn baby, you don't see this. But here, and you as a full-grown adult, absolutely. Because you're standing upright, putting all that weight on your shoulders. All right, let's see here. Meatus, fossa, yeah. Oh, what's this? What's that right there? Oh, it's the sphenoid sinus. Big open area. There's a frontal sinus up front right there, obviously. All right. I believe we talked about the internal and external acoustic meatus, did we not? I want to hit you with this one more time. Again, the reason I show you these things is because it's going to be important as time progresses. The area between my fingers, right there, that lump of bone. Imagine I could just take that out, right? There's a lump of bone right there between my fingers. That is your ear base hearing apparatus. It's in there, both sides, one on each side, okay? So that's your inner ear and middle ear right there between my fingers. So what you got to realize is that sound waves come in to the external acoustic meatus, it's your ear, okay? And then they were processed by the neural apparatus between my fingers right there. And a nerve comes out at the internal acoustic meatus on the inside of the skull. So sound waves come in the external acoustic meatus, and then a nerve travels out of the internal acoustic meatus from that ear apparatus right there between my fingers. So that's where that's located. Pretty soon we're going to be talking about special senses, and we're going to talk about how hearing works. Having a grasp of where it is, it's going to help us. All right? It's going to help us. All right, good. Let's go here. Oh, here's all our sinuses. Look how pretty. Oh my gosh. Great. I believe we've already talked about the nasal conchae, but let's make sure we're on the same page. Why do you have nasal conchae? Why do you have sinuses?
Helps spin air and warm it up, and
All right, first things first. You said something fascinating. So spin the air.
it says spin air inhaled.
All right. Can you see how this is shaped?
Mhm.
These are the turbinates, okay, the parts of the nasal conchae. They do make the air, well, a good term would be turbulent, okay? It causes turbulent flow, not laminar flow, but turbulent flow. Let me give you some good physics terms. Y'all ready for this?
No.
Laminar flow means a liquid or a gas moves in a straight line. Laminar, line-like. Okay, laminar flow. Turbulent flow is when fluid or air moves, but it's just all over the place. Okay? It's very turbulent. Okay? Turbulent flow. Welcome. What's happening here is when we have these nasal conchae, it causes the air we breathe in to be very turbulent. And what that does is it allows the mucous membranes of our nose and our throat to kind of clean the air up. Like if there's any debris in there, it gets caught. Did I tell y'all why I had a stuffy nose the other day? You probably noticed though, because I was walking around talking like that. Yes?
I mean,
Oh man, let me tell you what happened. I was working in my garage, and I was sanding down some paint on this greasy old grimy piece of equipment so I could repaint it and have it nice again and use it, okay? In my infinite wisdom, I didn't realize that's what I was going to be doing. I thought I was just getting it set up to do it. Then I ended up doing the work, all right? It's a real dumb move. It was a real dumb move on my part. And then about halfway through, I realized what I was doing, and I was like, oh man. So I put my respirator on, okay, full face respirator. Always smart, keep your lungs clean. But it was too late. Damage is done. And when I walked back in the house, I could feel like itchiness all up through here. Okay, look, we're all adults. Tell you something gross. So I'm like, clear my nose, and I spit in the sink, and it's like all this grimy gross that I've been inhaling because my nasal passages caught that stuff and allowed me to clear it from my system without it getting down in my lungs. I mean, did something get down in my lungs? I'm sure, okay? But I coughed that up too, and the side effect of this is it inflamed my nasal passages, so I had a runny nose for like days. It was no fun. But this system causes the air to spin. So anything in it gets trapped in your nasal mucus, so it cleans it. Great move. Further, your nasal passages have some surface area here. And look at all the blood vessels. Can you see them? That ain't hair, that's blood vessels, man. It's going to warm the air up. And these are wet linings. Side effect of that, they humidify the air. So air coming in through your nose, which is how you breathe through our nose, is going to be warm, clean, and humid. There we go. Good to get that other finger down there. Warm, clean, and humid as it makes its way down to our lungs, because that's the kind of air that our lungs like. Okay? So breathing through our nose is important for this process. This is simply to point out how fancy your skull is. Like there's 7 bones that come together to form your orbital concavity, if you will. What do you call that thing? Yeah, that'll do. That'll do. Your orbital framework. That'll work. That'll do. I want to tell y'all stories about people breaking their orbital bones. Let's not do that. Let's go here. The hyoid bone we've already discussed. So the hyoid bone, which you can see here, is fascinating. Why is the hyoid bone fascinating? What does it not do?
It's not connected to anything.
Good. It says membranes. It's held in place by membranes. And the way you do this, take your middle finger and touch your Adam's apple. And if you go up 2 inches, inch and a half, that's your hyoid bone right in there. Okay? It forms the base of your tracheal passages. So your Adam's apple is what's called the tracheal prominence. Okay? And right above that's where the hyoid comes down. Okay? It forms the base of the tongue, assists us with our swallowing capacities, allows the air passages to stay open in that sense. All right, good. Now, this is where I want to be. We need to talk a little bit about the vertebral column. This is so important. Holy cow, this is so important. Now, we've already kind of played this game. You know you got 7, 12, and 5. 7 cervical vertebrae, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar. Yes? Does that sound familiar? What makes a thoracic vertebrae a thoracic vertebrae? What does the neck do?
Your ribs.
You better believe it. So you got 7 cervical in the neck, 12 thoracic, connecting to the ribs, and then 5 lumbar vertebrae, which are the big ones in your lower back that everybody loves to hate. Okay? Now, and just to get all our terms out of the way, the sacrum here, the sacrum is what connects the coxal bones and forms up the pelvis in essence. And then the coccyx, what's the coccyx oftentimes called?
Tailbone.
Tailbone. And you break your tailbone, you're going to sit on a rubber donut for a while. I think we had that conversation, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
Man, the tailbone, the enemy of gymnasts everywhere. Okay? You fall down hard enough on your back end, you're going to break your tailbone. Right? It's just life. Then you're sitting on a rubber donut for a while because it's very painful and you're not going to wear a cast. Okay? With that in mind, is this where I want to be? Yes. Resilience and flexibility. Okay. Your spine has a unique appearance, and it's there for a reason. Okay? It's there for a reason, not just to hold your back up. When you look at your spine is very different from a newborn baby's spine, and it's all very different from the spine of something like a chimpanzee or other great ape. Okay? The trick to this is, I gotta get a skull of an ape, man. That's gotta happen. I'll get a plastic gorilla skull one of these days. And I'll be able to explain this so much better. You guys got to remind me to go to order one. This would be way better conversation with that process. Here's your skull. Okay? Here's your skull. It's going to look something like this. It balances pretty dang good on my thumb. Okay? The idea is the foramen magnum. What's the foramen magnum? The big hole in the bottom. Good. The foramen magnum is placed forward. Okay, it's really forward. It's almost right in the middle of the skull. So if you hold your head right, it's balanced. That's what I'm trying to say here, folks. It's pretty daggone well balanced. Whereas when you look at a chimpanzee or something like that, it is not the case. On a chimpanzee, the foramen magnum is way at the back of the occipital bone. So it'd be way back here like this. All right? Why would the skull on a chimp or a gorilla be way back there? What do they do that you don't? They do. They got their hands down, man. They got the knuckles on the ground. Their head, it hangs. Okay? Pay attention. Next time you're watching some sort of TV show, their head will hang down because the foramen magnum is right at the back of the skull. Which bears the obvious question, why is yours in the middle? Because we are bipedal. We stand up and we balance our head on our shoulders. Everybody with me on this?
Yes.
There's more that goes into this. You've seen a 2-year-old trying to walk around, 1-year-old walking around? Yes?
Yes.
Little kids, what I'm trying to say. It all goes together now, because my son's 2 and he runs and sprints. So we're talking an early 2 or a mid 1. You know, they're barely getting there. And it's the funniest thing you've ever watched when they run around and they're like, all the limbs are flailing. It's the best thing that's ever
Oh,
happened.
that's great.
Okay? But when a kid's learning to walk and they're pulling themselves up, you'll see them, man, and they're like, okay? I've seen it 3 times. It's hilarious every time. Okay? Unless you're on hardwood floors.
Not so funny.
Yeah, carpet's better in that case. So they're sitting there like this. Now, it's hard for a reason. Because little kids, their head is proportionally incredibly large compared to their body size. Your head reaches adult size by the time you're 9, your body does not. Okay? You got a lot of growing left to do. So you'll have a head that's like a gourd sitting on top of a tiny little body. Balancing that thing out is difficult. Okay? It's difficult. But to do this, we develop spinal curvatures. Okay? We develop spinal curvatures. The spine has a little bit of a twist and a turn going on. You'll see a cervical curvature at the top. Imagine you're a little kid, you want to stand up. Let's start at the bottom and work our way up, actually. Lower spine, here in the lumbar area. What you're going to do is, if you're on all fours, you're going to sit up. Means you're leaning back, okay? Get that lower spine curvature. So then in the thoracic area, you bring the shoulders forward, okay? Then your head's down, so you can lift your head up, like so. And what you end up with is this classic, there we go, this classic set of curvatures that allows you to balance yourself on your pelvis so that you can walk around and do the things that you do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a reason for this. All these curvatures mean that when we're walking around, the spine acts like a spring, okay? On your vertebral discs, your spine acts like a spring, so every step you take, there's a little bit of a balance to it, okay? That's because your spine allows for a little bit of a spring-like action. It has give to it so that you're not putting a lot of energy into an individual joint. The whole spine acts together like a spring, and it works like a charm. Further, hang on, what else I want to say? With any of this, there can be problems. And these problems, as I alluded to a few minutes ago, certainly didn't think we'd already done it, are scoliosis, kyphosis, and lordosis. They look like this. You're all aware of scoliosis, I assume. Probably all had to get tested for this when you were in elementary school, or at least like 6th grade or something like that. Basically, when you start going through puberty, they're going to check you for scoliosis in high school. Okay, can I just have a curiosity? Just, help me out. Who was in high school or wherever in school when they were looking for scoliosis? Most of you. Okay. Just curious. I assume they still did this, but who knows? Why? First, let's do the how, I guess. What is scoliosis?
Funky back disease.
Side to side. Okay, it's going to go side to side. When the spine goes side to side, that's scoliosis. Can you see this? Here, sway back, man. Side to side. This is a pretty extreme case, but you get my point. Why do we care about scoliosis? Is it just cosmetic?
No.
Most of the countries, they don't get braces to fix their teeth. It's a totally American narcissist thing. Is this the same thing?
Mm-mm.
Because this can lead to pinching of the nerves between the vertebrae on the sides where it's compacted, and lots of pain and suffering over time. So we don't want to leave this be. How do we fix it? Catch it early.
Brace.
Brace it up. Me and my cousin, she had a nasty case of scoliosis, real bad. I mean, we're talking pretty rough, okay? They took her and chucked her in a brace for a couple of years. Went away, man. And now, I'm sure those years were rough. You can imagine, like, being a 14-year-old girl to have to wear a brace everywhere you go for years, but now she's fine. No surgery, okay? No surgery. We brace this thing up, puts the spinal cord back into appropriate alignment. After a little while, things turn out fine. Works like a charm. Yeah, that's scoliosis. I guess that'll do. I haven't even looked at my clock. I haven't even looked at what we're supposed to do today. I'm just enjoying the moment, I guess. All right, kyphosis. We've already talked about these folks. See the hunch?
Mhm.
She was not born this way. This developed over time. This is from the weight of her head and shoulders pulling down, causing compression fractures of the spine. This is what we see in older folks with osteoporosis. Classic osteoporotic, older individual, this hunched appearance, if you will. All right? And then last but not least, lordosis. Lordosis is an extreme curvature of the lower spine. All right? Now, how do you get lordosis? Well, let me show you. Imagine I've got this chair. And in a normal situation, my spine has the standard curvatures. But if I grab this chair and I pick it up and I hold it in front of me, I don't just stand normal, okay? That would get real painful real fast. So to balance myself, I lean back a little bit. Everybody with me?
Mhm.
Now, let's say I got a chair carry this. Let's try again in English. Let's say I got to carry this chair around for a little while. What's a nice arbitrary amount of time to carry this chair around? 9 months? That's a nice arbitrary amount of time.
That's
Random?
good.
It's a random amount. Yeah?
Very random.
Okay, pretty random. What's going to happen after 9 months of me carrying this chair and I finally put it down? Ugh. My spine is going to have a little bit of an extra curvature to it. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
We see this oftentimes in pregnant women who are small naturally, petite body forms, right? When people are very small to begin with, they're having to carry, 6, 7, 8 pounds of baby around for a long period of time. We see this abnormal curvature. A very good friend of mine I worked with a long time ago, she might have weighed 90 pounds. She had 3 kids. None of them were small, okay? She had really extreme lordosis. Why do we care about this? This puts a lot of stress and strain against the vertebral discs and leads to bone-to-bone contact and leads to herniations, which we don't want, all right? So this is certainly an issue that people have to deal with, lordosis, lower back problems. I mean, my wife's had 3 kids, okay? And she is not, I wouldn't call her a petite body form, like she's a normal adult, but even then she's got lower back problems these days. And it's because of this, man. It's because carry those kids around. Speaking of herniations, do you see them?
I do.
Where?
It's in the lower part where it's
Oh, were you looking at a picture here or here? This one? This one? Or this one?
I was looking at that one.
If you can tell me, right or left?
Right.
This one. Okay. Tell me when to stop. Yeah, right there. Do you see it?
Mhm.
All right, this is a herniated disc. The reason we worry about a herniated disc is oftentimes the protruding material from that herniation, if you will, presses against the spinal cord and causes lots of pain. Okay, this is not a fun experience. You can herniate a disc where this is not the case, but the ones where you do is the ones you hear about most of the time. Oh gosh. All right, so here is the classic herniated disc. You can see how thick the disc is, and then look at the distance here, all right? So all of this thickness is what we're looking for, and we end up with this. By bringing these vertebrae closer together, this is going to cause the nerves between the vertebrae to get pinched a little bit, and that's going to make them hurt. You're going to have pain and suffering as a result of this. And further, this is pressing against the spinal cord itself, so you're going to end up with like numbness in a leg or general pain and suffering. Okay, this is not a fun experience by any stretch of the imagination. What happens with a disc herniation? Remember, your vertebral discs, how many times have I said this, are basically like a gelatinous ball, like a racquetball almost, inside of a bunch of duct tape. You get this annulus fibrosus. Annulus means ring. Fibrosis means
Fiber.
fiber. It's a ring of fiber around the outside, the annulus fibrosus. And the central core of this thing, didn't know who you were for a second there. I'm on my toes these days after old Presidente dropped by. That was interesting. I'm so glad. But here's the sad thing, I haven't seen him since.
Oh, well.
I heard he wandered through the faculty hall the other day. That's good.
Progress.
Let's just take a little break. Like, it's a really good thing where the people that run the place are paying attention to the place. That's so nice and different. So much better. All right, moving on. I mean, not sing praises just yet. Need more evidence. All right. The inner core of this is the nucleus pulposus. Nucleus means center. Okay. Pulposus, it's gooey. Okay, the gooey center. So you get this gooey center and a ring of fibers around the outside. You compress this thing hard enough, it'll pop like a balloon. All right. You put air into a balloon. It's strong on the outside, but open on the inside. If you squeeze that thing tight enough, it'll pop. You can pop these two. Oh my gosh, my gymnasts back at UA. I heard lots of great stories. Wait, let me rephrase that. Terrible stories. Terrible stories. Imagine crazy tumbling routine and then coming down expecting your feet and landing square on your back end. So all that energy just goes up through the spinal cord. Yeah. Or I can tell you about my father and his infinite wisdom. This is a good one. We're on the farm. It's the farm. Man, no better place on earth to grow up. So my father backs the tractor up to a plow, and he's going to take the plow and put it on the tractor and go use the daggum thing. What you're supposed to have here is what's called farm jack. It's this big jack, and you put it underneath the plow, and you jack it up to wherever the heck it's supposed to be, back the tractor up to it, away you go. But my father's my father. So he just reaches down and grabs the plow and lifts it up and sits it on the tongue of the tractor, as you do. He's like, oh. What's the matter? I don't know, my back just popped. Oh, the heck. A few days goes by, worse and worse. Yeah. Popped all right. You ruptured a disc. When he lifted up on that thing, all that excess weight on the spinal cord, popped one of his discs like a balloon, man. Popped it like a balloon. Infinite wisdom. Now he lives with all kind of back pain because he didn't use a freaking jack. One of my former students would say, think smarter, not harder. Okay? Do it right the first time. My brother, he's got a herniated disc as well. I have a history of ignorant moves in my family.
Same.
Oh man, it's me and my lower back after picking up ping pong balls off the floor of ACA. I told y'all about that, right? Jeez, right. Luckily, I think I'm back to normal. I'm nearly there. Like every now and again I feel it, but I'm nearly back, okay? No pun intended. My brother, you ready for this? It's the dumbest one. It's awful. This is an awful, dumb thing. He's outside of a building, and they're cutting a limb off of a tree. You know where he stands? Under it. Yeah. At some stage, your natural selective pressures, your strive to survive and pass on your genetics have to take over, and you would not stand underneath the limb when it's falling. He stands underneath the limb, comes down and hits him square on top of the head.
Shit.
Glad it didn't hit him anywhere else, because that part's hard enough to take the lick. Ruptured a disc in his neck. He got a cervical rupture. All right? So it hit him so hard on top of the head, it popped one of his vertebral discs. He was like, look at these x-rays, is this bad? And I was like, no, I can be all right. Real bad. Real bad. How do we treat this? What do we do? You know?
You remove the disc.
Say again? Fusing discs. So what we can do, like let's pretend that this one's compressed here, and the person's getting all kind of pain and suffering, they've got issues, and we need to fix it. So what we can do is we can do surgery, open them up, spread the discs back apart, and then fuse them together. Pins and wire and whatever else. They oftentimes do this with bone grafting as well, so they'll build like a lattice out of coral, basically, and it's basically bone at that stage. And pack it all in there around it, and fuse those two discs together. And you lose a little of your flexibility, all right? Like this is all spinal cord flexibility here, folks. All spinal cord flexibility. Oh, it helps here. But you don't have the pain and suffering. You don't hurt, which is good. Okay, which is good. So we can address this. You can't jack it up and let it heal. It's not the way this works. But you can go in there and brace it up and fuse them together. All right, good. I believe we've already talked about the atlas and the axis a little bit, yes?
Mm-hmm.
So you know that this is the atlas, it connects to the skull. Here is the axis, it has the dens. Everybody with me? And what is the relationship here? They have a special joint, don't they? For 5 points on your exam. Anybody remember the name of that joint? Starts with a P. Ah, a pivot joint. There you go. All right, so you certainly do have a pivot joint here. Where else in the body do you find it? Kind of. Not your elbow necessarily. But
Your
it's
wrist.
called a radioulnar joint between the radius and the ulna. So not only can I do this with the pivot joint in my arm, but I can do this with the pivot joint in my neck. All right? So it's between the first two vertebrae, C1 and C2, the atlas and the axis. Yeah, man. Let's talk about the ribs and the sternum. So you know you got 7 true ribs. They connect directly to the sternum, so they're 1 to 1. You can see this through here. And then there is some play in this. There's false ribs and floating ribs. Generally speaking, false ribs don't connect directly to the sternum. So you can see false ribs here connecting to each other, and then to the sternum, okay, connected to each other, then to the sternum, and then the last 2 are further considered floating ribs because what do? They float. They have no connection to the sternum whatsoever. Now the sternum itself, did we talk about the sternum? Did we talk about the sword? All right, here's one of the great sadnesses in naming numerology. No, that'd be numbers. Etymology, the way things are named, etymology. The name of the sternum was changed years ago, and I think it's way better calling it what it used to be called. Now look, we're going to call it the freaking sternum. Well, the sternum, there we go. We're going to call it the sternum, but it used to be called the gladiolus, and I think that's way cooler. What is a gladius, Keontae?
That's like people that used to fight, right? Like a Roman
That's a gladiator. Gladiator is one who uses a gladius. A gladius is a Roman sword. Okay, the sword of empire. Thousands fell beneath this blade. All right, the Roman gladius. What a terrible tool. Short sword. So the idea is get a bunch of Romans together, a legion. Okay, pack them shield to shield. Okay, so there's just a little gap in between the shields. And the guy behind you takes his shield, puts it over top of your head. So, am I describing a testudo to you guys? I mean, you need to know this, right? You
Yes.
should know about this. So I'm going to tell you. You get a little more than just anatomy and physiology in Mr. Hopper's anatomy and physiology class, dadgummit. So I'm going to describe a testudo to you. So you got a shield and it's big. It's like yay tall and it's curved against your body like this. And the guy behind you walking in on a weird conversation. The guy behind you takes his shield, puts it over the top of your head, and the edges of it go down into your shield. So what you have is a visor, all right? So you're sitting there, you've got a visor, and everybody's covered on top, you got the shield in front, and you got your sword, your gladius. And it's short, not long. You don't want a long sword for this. And what happens is you're just walking and doing this, all right?
My shield wall?
Yeah, totally. Well, testudo, but yes, a phalanx, as it were. Moving on. So the person behind you has a spear, and they can use their spear over top of you. And then way on back, there's a guy called Centurion, and Centurion's got a whistle. Let me tell you about how terrifying Roman legions were. My good Lord, I got chill bumps just talking about this. I wish I could do some history for you guys. Guy's got a whistle, and I think it's 15 seconds, he blows the whistle. So when he blows the whistle, you open your shield up and take a step back. Oh, shoot. You open your shield up and take a step back, and the guy behind you comes forward. And it's like a revolving new cast. So every soldier gets 15 seconds on the front, then you revolve around. Now, why the heck am I talking about this? Oh, the sword. And they're using a sword called a gladius, which is why we called the sternum the gladiolus. All right? So it's supposed to look like a Roman sword. The top of it's called the manubrium. So anything, if with M-A-N-U, manus is the root term here. Manus means the hand. So the top of the sword on the gladius, okay, the grip, if you will, is called the manus. So the top of the sternum is called the manubrium, the place where the hand would go. It's the top of the blade, if you will. So here versus there. The body of the sternum, or the body of the gladiolus, and then the base of it's called the xiphoid process. Xiphus. This is the xiphus of the Roman gladius. All right? So this is the xiphoid process there on the sternum. So I expect you to know that your sternum's a flat ball. The top of it's the manubrium, you got a body, and then a xiphoid process down here at the bottom, and it's important for connecting to the ribs. Now, do. Everybody here should go home, watch HBO's Rome, start to finish, because it's fabulous. It has some of the best realistic portrayals of Roman warfare you've ever seen in your life. Blow your mind. Like, it's just a machine. Just a machine, man. They didn't care who they're fighting. It came soon, folks. They're doing this with swords. It's crazy. Crazy stuff. Oh, let's talk about the pelvis. Yeah, let's have some of that. The pelvis, man. What a fascinating structure in the skeleton. And the way that it's structured is very interesting. Quite different when you're young versus when you're old. Quite different between males and females. Now, when we look at the pelvis, how deep do I want to go here? I'm just going to tell you what I think about it. Deal? I mean, I'm sort of, it's one of those days. I'm going to make myself feel bad now. I'm going to check what I was supposed to do today. What's the day? The 23rd?
Yes.
Woo. Okay, we're good. I looked at March and I was like, oh, roll month, we're good. So this is what we're supposed to do. We're doing great today. All right, here we go. Male and female pelvis are very different. The male pelvis is narrow and small and light. It's this tiny little thing. Whereas the female pelvis is the same thing, but like enlarged in a variety of different ways. And there's this fun thing that you can do with folks where you have them kind of get on their knees and stick their head out and see how far out they can touch their nose to the ground. And females, it's like a mile different. Like a male, you can't hardly do it. You can't even lean over without hitting your head. Whereas a female can, because the counterbalancing act of the pelvis being vastly heavier by comparison. Like, this augments the whole body structure, the whole like general arithmetic of the body. Like a male's pelvis being very concise, the body tends to be more inset. The shoulders are more square to the knees, a whole variety of things. Whereas in a female pelvis, things are a little bit more opened up. Let me show you. So here is a male and female pelvis. And with any luck, you're not going to fall off of this thing when I pick it up. Just a little loose. A little loose, but not enough that I'm not going to carry it around. When I hold this thing like so, I hope you can see that one of these pelvises has everything turned internally. All right? Everything's on the inside. It's all turned in. Sharp spines, the tailbone, like everything's pointy-inny, okay? That is not a good place to be, for instance, if you're a little kid. Anybody with me on this? Whereas in the female pelvis, everything's very open. When you look inside of here, it's very open. Whereas in here, everything's turned in. Like these ischial spines, they stick in. The coccyx sticks in. Do you see the concept here? And then further, if I turn it like so, what I want you to notice, do I have a pelvis? Yes, I do. But I really want one I can show you that isn't on here. I want to just take this apart now. Can we just pretend? Okay, if I grab the male pelvis and pick it up, I can take it and just rest the tailbone in my hand and hold it up like this. Because the whole sacrum and coccyx, it's just rolled underneath like so. Like if I go to here, on the male side, like it's all just rolled in. The angle, look at the angle here versus the angle here. You guys see the difference? Very large, very small by comparison. The parts are just turned inwards on the male pelvis by comparison to the female pelvis. So, one of the ways that we can very quickly distinguish male versus female, let me try again in English, male versus female in a skeleton is the pelvis. There we go. There's the words in the right order. So, when we look at skeletons from way on back in the day, it's very easy to distinguish because we simply look at the pelvis and look at how things are oriented. Works like a charm. Does that work? Sounds about right. Okay, all right, that'll do. How many slides left? Like 3 or 4, I assume? 4 or 5? All right, we're about done. I'm feeling it. I'm starting to go on the downswing of this. Like I'm having a great time, if you can't tell, but I'm certainly getting on the downswing now. Because we're kind of past the fun. Everything else is just sad. All right, moving on. Hang on, we're probably going to talk about osteoporosis, not osteoporosis, but joint issues here in a second. All right, there's patella. What's special about the patella? What is it? What kind of bone is that? Louder. It's a sesamoid bone. It's a sesamoid bone. That means it's found within a tendon, within a ligament, yeah? So you can see this here. It is gonna be sitting up against the knee, but it's found within that tendon, in that ligament setup. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna allow the knee to move around, allow the joint to move without the ligament damaging the cartilage therein. Is everybody with me on this? We've talked about this, so I'm not gonna rehash it. Basically, ligaments are like sandpaper to joints. We don't want that. Condyles, epicondyles, yeah. We're gonna be talking at length about this in lab, so I'm not that concerned. We established that we're gonna push the lab back a week, yeah? Good. We've already talked about the intercondylar eminence. That's where your ACL would connect normally. Do we wanna do the knee right now? Tibial tuberosity, that's where the patellar ligament would connect. And there's the foot. Somebody asked me a foot question, and I said we're gonna talk about it later. Right. Do we wanna talk about the knee? I think I do this when I do joints. Question?
With the foot, is there any difference depending on somebody has like a high arch or a low arch?
Yeah, there's constant variances that occur. I mean, you can end up with issues, like somebody that's got really flat feet, will struggle with carrying heavy burdens for a period of time. If you guys aren't aware, okay, this is pretty helpful. So back in like World War II draft times, one of the things they would check is the arches in your feet. Okay, so if you got a bunch of dudes carrying heavy weight around, I'm sure there's some military folks in here. What's a pack weight?
I'm in the military, I don't know what they use. Sorry.
Wait, what?
Like a full gear rucksack, all that, what's that
Oh,
weigh?
about 20 to 30 pounds.
Oh, it's more.
It's like
I
60.
think it's 60.
It's 60 pounds.
Depends on how much you put in it, really. If it's really full, then it could be up to 80 pounds.
Okay, so in other words, a lot of weight. And the trick is you gotta be able to carry that for long periods of time. Somebody that's got very flat feet, they'll struggle with that because the feet just, they can't take the beating that they would take otherwise. So when you have a good strong arch in the foot,
Why am I
it's
so,
not me.
why,
You
am, why am I so draftable?
Yeah, well, when you have a high arch, you gotta think about this as like a Roman archway, okay? Yeah, there's a lot of Roman references in this class, and Greek, and we're gonna have some Macedonian later. Give me time, you're gonna love this. I love this stuff. What do you want from me? Moving on. All right, you gotta think about this as a Roman archway. When all the bones are up like this, they all lead to one another. Okay, so the weight of the body gets pressed down evenly amongst them. It's pressed down into the ground directly. There's a thick band of connective tissue called the plantar fascia, which some of you are aware of distinctly, right?
Yes.
Called the plantar fascia. It'll connect the calcaneus, that's your heel bone, to the front of the foot. So when you have a high arch, this is a very effective way of doing business. Whereas if you have low arches or no arches, you're kind of planting weight on the talus, that's this bone here, and it's spreading the foot apart as opposed to compacting it together. So when you have low arches, you're more likely to have issues with your feet when you're carrying heavy weight. Is that fair?
Yes.
All right. Those other questions, what were they?
So what it called when their feet go in?
Okay, are we talking about if you have your feet on the ground, your feet can tilt inwards or outwards?
Yeah.
This is normally just from random growth-based issues. So you've heard of growing pains. We talked about scoliosis, same thing. So you can have issues where the tendons are kind of really strong on one side and weak on the other. So when you're growing, the feet can, vary a little bit. Human genetic variation. Like it can be extreme. Like we've all heard of someone who is pigeon-toed in an extreme fashion where the feet really tilt inwards. Yeah, human genetic variation.
No, I ain't talking about like pigeon toe. I'm talking about like when they walking, like say they standing up, but they leaning, like they leaning.
Yeah, that's what I'm
walking
saying. So there's all sorts of random genetic variances. I'm sure there's a term for it, but in most cases these go untreated. Like it's not something we have to worry that much about unless somebody's got like real problems. Then they could probably brace it and over time work it to where it needs to be. But like I've never heard of anybody getting major treatments. We should talk. All right. Let's briefly mention plantar fasciitis. I mean, why not? Plantar fasciitis. What happens? This is very common, okay? And not even that. So what's going to happen on a simple concept here? is when you're putting a lot of stress on the foot, that's this archway, it's gonna be constantly stretching that plantar fascia. And it gets inflamed. And anytime something gets inflamed, it's an itis. Like pancreatitis is an inflamed pancreas. Okay, but this is plantar fasciitis. This is an inflammation of the plantar fascia. So it hurts. So what do you have to do?
They clip it.
Do what? They clip it?
Yeah, we got patients like literally they just clip it because they just can't seem to operate. Like we got a patient, frequent flyer, always in there. I don't even think he cares. He's overweight and he just wears flip flops with no support in his feet or shoes whatsoever. And they just decided to clip it. We had another one like that, but he wore like work boots and stuff. And he had support. They clipped his.
They had to have just trimmed it.
No,
Ow.
they clipped it.
They clip it, the whole foot would collapse.
His foot was already there.
Moving on. I never heard of that. That's fresh. That's a new idea. Just blew my mind.
His foot was all, like his arch was basically gone, and it was just more just like
Gone now?
inflammation with that tendon.
They had to have just trimmed it up a little bit. Had to have.
They tried that. They
Folks
just-
develop bone spurs, like this was kind of the concept here. They develop bone spurs when there's constant pulling on these. We get out of here in 10 minutes, is that right?
Hurts.
Whew, yeah, dang, okay. All right. Let's have a little talk, and then we'll move on. So, I'm not gonna pull up a new lecture for you, but let's just chat a little bit about muscles. All right, we're gonna have a little muscle chat in the next 10 minutes, and then we're gonna call it a day. Is that a deal? Because this is theoretically where we're supposed to stop for the day. So we're gonna have a little muscle chat. You know that there's 3 types of muscle. Well, hang on, let me say this. What is to follow is rough. I ain't gonna play games with you. Hardest thing we're gonna do all semester. It's the hardest thing you're gonna do in most of anatomy and physiology is muscle flexion. It's a lot of steps and a lot of complications. No math, but a lot of steps and a lot of complications. Let's talk a little bit about it. A little foreshadowing before we get there. And if you want to be, listen up, to do this well, to do muscles correctly, you really have to hear it a few times. Okay? You gotta hear me walk through it with you a few times. If you want to not be super stressed out, if you want, hang on, don't pack up, you won't make me sad. If you want to not be stressed out, a really good way to keep from being stressed out is to hop on my YouTube channel and watch the next lecture before you walk in next time. Got to get through the muscle flexion part. If you can get through, just listen to it and get stressed out and worried, that's perfect, okay? You just need to be exposed to it before you walk in the door. So, did you not do as well on your first test as you would like? Well, take your future in your hands and go and watch that dadgum video before you walk in here on Monday of next week. Come in prepared. Come in prepared, and you'll be in a way better place to do better on your next test. Or you can just accept your fate and move on about your business and ignore my comments. That works too, I guess. You got no pity. Now, let's talk a little bit about it. You got 3 types of muscle, and you know this. What are your 3 types of muscle? Cardiac and smooth, and they're all different. Skeletal muscle, we say it's striated and voluntary. Means it's got stripes, and voluntary means what?
Loose.
I control it, okay? Cardiac muscle is striated involuntary, so it still has a repeating pattern in its coloration. It's still got this repeating light dark pattern, but it's involuntary. We don't control it. Do you think about making your heart beat? No, you don't. This happens. It's involuntary. And then smooth muscle has a smooth appearance. It is not striated. It is involuntary. We do not control our smooth muscle. Where do we find smooth muscle? Intestines are a great place to look. Okay, where they do what's called peristalsis. If we had this conversation, peristaltic motion, that rhythmic pumping action. Now, all of your muscle has the same basic constituent parts. Okay, they're all the same inside. They may be arranged a little different, but it's all the same bit. What are called myofibrils? What is it inside your muscles that allow for muscle flexion? 2 of them. Anybody know? Myosin and actin. Actin and myosin. These are derived from your cytoskeleton, okay, the cellular skeleton itself. So like all your cells have some actin filaments. microfilaments. You guys remember microfilaments?
Mm-hmm.
They've all got some actin in them, but your muscles have lots of actin and lots of another protein subunit called myosin. So actin and myosin have a unique relationship. The gist of this is actin is like a rope. It's like a ladder upon which myosin climbs. Let me say that again. Actin and myosin are your myofibrils. That's what makes muscle is the actin and the myosin. Okay? Myosin has ATPase. It can break down ATP, and myosin has these grabby little hands. Okay? So it can grab a hold of stuff and climb. So actin is the ladder upon which myosin climbs. So imagine a lattice work, and when there's ATP in the system, the myosin can grab a hold of it and climb through the length of the daggone thing. The actin and the myosin, they don't change length. They simply move past one another. Much like you don't get taller when you climb a ladder, you simply move up it. Okay? So it's actin and myosin, and they're repeating patterns that give rise to striations that you see in skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle. Whereas in smooth muscle, it's still got actin and myosin. They're just all over the place, so you don't get that repeating pattern. And with that in mind, let's stop it right there, team. Let's call it a day right there. And we're going to pick up on a pretty freaking complicated lecture on Monday. Come prepared.